Welcome to Boroughs and Burbs with hosts John Engel and Roberto Cabrera. Over the next hour, you're going to learn some insider knowledge that will help you overcome and strategize in the cutthroat world of real estate. Now, here are your hosts, John and Roberto.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Boroughs and Burbs 94. I'm John Engel of Douglas Elliman in Connecticut, and that's my co-host.
I'm Roberto Cabrera. I am with Brown Hair Stevens, and I'm on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
And I just want to thank our sponsor, Grace Farms. You'll find them at gracefarms.org, one of the most outstanding pieces of architecture in all of North America, certainly in Connecticut. And they're doing great work with designforfreedom.org. Check it out, Design for Freedom, about ethical sourcing of building materials in the construction of homes, offices, and everything else. So designforfreedom.org and check out gracefarms.org. And with that, I'd like to start with episode 94. We don't have a special guest. You're all our special guests. We really wanted to just do a review of the market at the half-year point of the year. That was Roberto's idea. And so do you want to start? Why do you think this is a good idea, Roberto?
Well, it's not necessarily it's a good idea, but it's also a matter of us sharing ideas as to what is actually happening. I find that the market, at least in Manhattan, has really, it's a cyclical thing that it's summer, but I do feel that it's kind of grinding down a little bit. That said, some of the numbers reflect that we're still doing deals. Deals are still happening when things are priced right. It's when someone comes on the market at even slightly aggressive that they just get zero activity whatsoever. I had a property on the market. The sellers bought it in 2015 for $950, and we put it on at $950. We got no activity, and then everybody who came through the door actually would say, it doesn't seem like it's a bad price, but they just wouldn't transact. Then we went to $895. Still not quite much activity. A different set of buyers was coming through, but nothing really happened. We dropped to $875, and all of a sudden this huge cluster has come. So it was about finding that price level, because I think there's people in every category that are still there. Like you had mentioned in your newsletter that you're seeing, the price bidding wars, but at the right price for only a number of properties, right?
Would you say it was only the price or was also the timing? Because as we talked about on this show, at least once, some people said that it was a late spring market. And so if you put that out there at 900 in March, maybe it was the wrong price, but maybe it was the wrong month.
We came out 80 some days ago. I think it was actually the very end of April, beginning of May. It actually wasn't. Because everything had started late, we were waiting because I hadn't seen much momentum as of yet. And then it started to come through, which is why we decided to list at that time. And I guess we were at the wrong price point at that time, but all of the data had shown otherwise.
So let's stick with my theory for a minute that the market was late. When did you not what month did you not have activity, and when did the light switch come on for that property?
We've had consistent showings. We have had 2-3 showings.
With the action, people took action when they realized that there wasn't anything better coming on, and they took action through a combination of price and timing. Would you say that was in May before people started taking action?
Late May.
Okay.
And then Memorial Day and everything, there was a hiccup of timing, of momentum. But we've had consistent showings throughout. It just hasn't transacted.
And when you put something out there at 900 and then you reduce the price to the point where you get action, are you expecting that the offers will come in at within 10% of asking, or they'll come in within $10,000 of asking?
I have zero expectations as to where they'll come in. It's a matter of guiding them as to the expectations of the seller and trying to get them into that range. Because the offers are literally, we had an offer that was very low, and we just in the end we didn't take it. Very low. Where it would also, where in my world, we deal with a lot of co-ops, it becomes a question of, can we deliver this to the board, because the board may reject it, because the board has a fiduciary responsibility also to maintain value for all the shareholders in the building. So if something comes through that they deem is not of certain value, it could just get kicked out.
So we had that experience this weekend. Somebody on my team put up a $389,000 one-bedroom condo, and somebody contacted me and he said, "I want you to put an offer in for $400,000." That was this weekend, and we said, "Okay." Alyssa in my office said, "Okay, the seller has decided we're going to go to best and final on Monday at noon. Get your offers in over the weekend, and we'd like to see proof of financing and all of your all of your package complete by Monday." It really only gave people 3 days to get ready. My client made a $400,000 offer on the 389 condo, and he had a mortgage contingency. And I think he I think he needed a mortgage contingency, but he was well qualified to spend much more on a condo. So he had a good job, he had good assets, he had a good financial history, but he wanted to get a VA loan for a $400,000 condo. Somebody came in and said, no contingencies, no building inspection, no mortgage contingency, cash offer, and paid over $400,000, and they got it. I think I'm not surprised that we're still getting cash offers coming in order to compete, because enough people at the, say, under $750,000 or under $1 million mark in Connecticut have been sensitized by bidding wars. We just had one in Southport, and Amy can speak to this, but we just had a bidding war last week in Southport at this level, and there were 23 offers on I want to say a $700,000 house, 23 offers, and my client came in at asking, and they were not in the top 12. So I think with that as a backdrop, I'm not surprised that we're getting bidding wars at the $400,000 level, and I'm not surprised that we're getting all cash offers. Amy, do you have any color on the Southport bidding war that just went on? Or Pam, I see you're on there.
Pam, I don't.
Okay.
Unmute.
Hi, go ahead.
Hi. What kind of color is it? Because I was going to say too, is that it was a house that needed a lot of work, and it was well priced. And the first weekend, all the offers came in. But I had a listing that I made the mistake of pricing it high. It was a condo. We priced it at 510. 2 weeks, I had tons of showings, over 30 showings, but no offers. We dropped it to 490, and then I had 5 offers. So then I was in a bidding war, and it didn't get over 500, but we got higher. So I think that's the market. They sit until they like the price, and then all of a sudden it turns into a bidding war.
What percentage of deals do you guys see with cash? Like, we used to, because of the interest rates, a lot of people don't want to finance. And we have always had kind of 39 to 40%, somewhere in that range of all cash deals. I saw a recent figure that we're close to 58% of all cash deals in Manhattan, which is extraordinary.
Well, we're also the full mortgage underwriting, which looks like cash because it doesn't have a mortgage contingency. Those are very dominant now, but yeah, most of the deals are cash or very strong financing.
I had a buyer who was very wealthy, and he always wanted to finance, and he really wanted to finance just because he wanted the bank to do all of the due diligence on the property. Whereas if you're paying cash, you kind of go into it blind. And he was like, they've got a whole team, and they're going to tell me everything that's wrong with this house, everything of that, where the building lacks insurance, where all the red flags are. And that's the way. And then he ended up buying in the end where he didn't use the bank. He ended up paying cash, but he let them do their due diligence and he paid them for it.
I want to make another point with the bidding wars. I'm finding that with the bidding wars, people are bidding over ask. And in the case of the $400,000 condo, no contingencies, over ask. What I'm finding is a relatively high percentage of those, maybe as much as 50%, fail and go to the backup. And I think that's interesting. I advised my client at this point when he said, "I'd like to offer 400,000," and I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I don't want to chase this beyond that." And I said, "I actually think that's a smart move. I don't think that this will appraise for more than 400,000 or for substantially more than 400,000, given that we have comps in the high threes over the last 6 months. And there's a good chance that the other deal will fall through for whatever reason, buyer's remorse, and that you may get it being in the backup position." So I think it's okay to be second in this market. You don't always have to be first, and you don't always have to chase these things. We're starting to see people chase these things to the point of 15% over ask. And the average on our market report across the 12 towns that we're tracking in Southern Fairfield County, the average is 100 or 101% of the asking price. So the conclusion is, as you're saying, once you get to a point where people get excited about a property, when you price it at an exciting level, you generate more activity, and it goes for 100% or more on average in Connecticut. That's what we're seeing.
And what are you saying from the seller side? I mean, are the sellers feeling compelled that they need to sell, or are they perfectly happy to sit there for a long time? Or they will only sell it at the level that they feel comfortable? And are they able to find something else to buy?
I think that the people who are selling now have to sell. You have estates where somebody may have died, or you have divorce, or you have kids who finally moved out of the house and for whom the house is perhaps no longer appropriate for a couple to be living in at least that's how they feel. Oh, we're in an 8,000 square foot house, a 6,000 square foot house, and this is just too much house for us. And they'll look to downsize, and then they'll realize that the payment on half as much house may be the same as what they're paying now. And then they have a decision to make. They have to decide whether the house that they're in is a high maintenance house or a low maintenance house. If you're in a situation where you can say, well, I'll just live with the extra square feet and wait until rates come down, or prices come down, and the math changes a bit. But a lot of people are very uncomfortable with trying to sell their large forever home, the home that they raised their entire family in, and downsize into something half as big for the same price. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of resistance. So
even
the
if
short answer to your question is the people who are selling now have to sell, really are highly motivated to sell because their job transfer or an estate or a divorce or some other circumstance.
We're also
John,
getting the sale leasebacks where they're selling their house. They don't know where they're going, but they're asking to rent back. And most buyers are willing to do that.
John, that's the case even when people have built equity and they could literally, if they're downsizing, they could in most cases pay cash. Their payments should be substantially lower. Even in that case, you're thinking, I mean, you're telling me that that differential is not so great?
I think that people are continuing to tell me that they have a mortgage in the 2%. And now at the 6.5% to 7% level, it's a big enough difference that some of them have been told the rates will go down. And now they've been told, well, maybe not this year. So there's no profound sense of urgency to sell in a market where the differential is 4.5 points.
I think you also have the lower priced properties have appreciated higher and faster than the higher priced properties. So what you used to, what 5 years ago, what you could get for $1 million was great. And today, 5 years ago, 5 years later here in New Canaan, what you can get for $1 million, you're not downsizing from your 8,000 square foot great house. And even if you save $1,000 a month or something, it's a big step down from what you were before. You'd have to go like $1.5 million, $1.7 million, $1.8 million. At that point, why sell it 2.6 or 2.5 when the mortgage rate is so low on that more expensive one.
Yeah. The interest rates are definitely affecting our market more than any other factor. You seem to think that in your market, John, that it's really the inventory more than the interest rates.
Yes, absolutely.
And how about, have the banks managed, you know, especially with a couple little failures along the way, are the banks, have they tightened up their lending restrictions, and is that starting to make its way into the process, or is their bureaucracy becoming so slow it just can't function, or is that really not an issue right now?
I've found, except for one particular case where the bank is they're forensically going through this building's financials, and there's all kinds of mistakes being done by the building. I find that they're really doing everything in their power to make it easy to lend, because no one is borrowing, or their numbers are substantially contracting, and they've got to lend that money. I mean, that's what I have found. I've found they're trying to be, as you know, they're trying to acquiesce to everything they can. But it's still tough. Still really hard.
Yeah.
So I want to go to Mary and I want to go to Nicole. Nicole's out west, but Mary in Rye, Westchester County, are you also finding that the low end of the market is seeing bidding wars, and are buyers interest rate sensitive?
There's few homes like a million, 1.4 million in Rye. And when they do come on, you're seeing a bidding war. At first, I think people were hesitant because of the increased mortgage rates, and now they've seemed to accept them, and they know they're not going down anytime soon. They need somewhere to live. They have to enroll in school. It's just a lack of inventory we're seeing, similar to you.
Totally agree. We're seeing the exact same thing. I think they were waiting for the first half of the spring market to see what the economy would do and where interest rates would shake out. By the time April, May, say late May rolled around, they said, okay, now I have to make a decision. I already have all the information I'm going to have. I've seen all the houses that are going to come on in the spring market, you know, and they dove in and they started to bid. We're talking about that sweet spot, that $1.5 million home. How about you, Nicole? Are you also seeing bidding wars at the lower end of the market in particular? And are you seeing interest rate sensitivity?
Yes, definitely seeing bidding wars going on in the lower price points. We're actually down 20% in active listings, 1.6% since last month. And so it is, you know, we're interest rate sensitive, but our bigger issue, much like yours, is inventory. And it's interesting because I'm having conversations. Normally, we don't encourage people to put listings on in the summer, but we are now encouraging people, if you're going to go on, stay on and stay strong. Normally in Scottsdale, it's so hot, so our summer months slow down. And we're telling people the opposite, of inventory still so low, that let's not let seasonality deter us, and could be an opportunity for buyers as well as sellers with as low of inventory as we have.
They have more eyeballs on fewer properties, so that's good for them.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? So with inventory scarce in all of our markets, how do you, as a realtor, you provide great value if you can turn over rocks and find inventory that others haven't found. And if you can get a listing, so much the better. How are we going out there and finding new inventory? Or what are we telling our clients? That there's just not that much inventory. This is the new normal. You should expect this to continue for the next couple of years. And I'm sorry, you know, I can't help you. Just keep watching the MLS like everybody else. What are we telling people who are our buyers, who are desperate for inventory, and what are we doing about it as agents to uncover inventory?
We're a little counter-cyclical to you guys, because I always believe that the biggest barrier to entering the Manhattan marketplace is not so much the price or finding the property, which is difficult. It's the competition. Right now, our demand is moderate, and for New York, moderate is low. The moment the interest rates start to level off and start to drop, everybody is going to come in. I mean, and the headline of my newsletter was, are you thinking about buying next year? So's everybody else. That's literally what's going to happen. So for us, I believe that, you know, for me, I'm telling people, if you're even thinking about buying, you need to jump in now and see what's out there and roll up your sleeves and try to make a deal happen, because you can actually negotiate right now. Whereas the moment there's someone else in the room with you bidding, you're not negotiating anymore, you're competing. So, and in New York, the competition can be pretty substantial. But I mean, with 22 offers and 23 offers, you seem to be seeing the same.
I think that we have our inventory in Connecticut is down in some towns by as much as 60%. We're down to 1/3 the normal inventory levels. I don't think that's going to change. I think you talked about modest demand in New York. I think in Connecticut we had high demand, and a lot of those buyers got discouraged by the increase in interest rates or the number of bidding wars and sat on the sidelines or are sitting on the sidelines. It's not because, as you say in your market report, that they're going to that they're hoping the spring is going to be a better opportunity. They're just burnt out by making 4, 5, 6, 7 attempts at buying a home and losing out time and time and time again. They acknowledge there's low inventory. They acknowledge interest rates are going up for the second half of this year, at least. And they're bummed out, and they're re-upping their New York apartment rentals for another year, resolved to just sit this out because they feel like they're stuck. And that's why I asked the question, so what are we doing for those people who said, you know what, I feel stuck. I don't feel like you can help me. I feel like I'm in such an imbalanced market that I'm going to go and rent. I'm going to give up. And I wonder, what can I do? And I guess I have to have those conversations with my potential sellers to unearth more inventory. I have to have conversations with them and talk to them about, so why aren't you selling? Well, because I have no place to go. Well, can we explore that together? You know, what are your expectations about price? Maybe you're going to get more for your house than you thought. You know, so those, by opening up those conversations with potential sellers, with our sellers, you know, maybe we can unearth more inventory. But it's a very imbalanced market throughout Connecticut, and I don't see any end in sight. And I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about it.
But so, like you had said in your market report, you had said, you know, once interest rates start to deflate a little bit, that you're then going to start to see more sellers come on the market, right? But you said there's going to be more buyers than those properties coming on the market. So your scenario is still tilted tremendously.
It is. I have a chart. I always have a chart.
Isn't it also, I mean, the demographics of the millennials, they're starting to have the school age children. And that's a huge demographic. And we're coming off the Gen Xers, where, you know, we were a smaller group than the greatest generation. And so it's just it demographically, I mean, things are very much bullish for real estate for at least another decade or so, I believe.
Actually, I'd like to talk about both what you just said, which is demographics, and what Roberto said, which is there's no end in sight. If we look at new U.S. single-family home sales, and we see that they went out of sight and that they came off a bit, they're still at 763,000. They're still relatively high. We're still at, aside from the COVID bump, at the highest point in 10 years. We're still at the highest point in 10 years of new U.S. single-family home sales.
But that's still not good, because I believe like replacement stock is somewhere around like 900,000. So, and again, I'm not sure if this gets into the multifamily too, but I think that we're still producing, you know, with the exception of that one giant spike, I think we're still producing fewer, and we have been for a decade, fewer homes, and we need to replace the stock that's out there.
How does that change, Scott? how does that, like, how do we produce more? What like, from your standpoint of what you do, what could happen? Is it all policy driven? Is it what is it?
Why aren't
Well,
you
you had-
building more houses, Scott Hobbs?
I mean, taking a look, like right now, I happen to be able to go up on vacation to Martha's Vineyard. It's my first time ever being up here. And you see how big the island is and how undeveloped huge chunks of it are. But then other chunks are very developed. And you know that the people that came here because it was something special and a respite and a way to get away from things, they don't want this area to be destroyed. And by the way, if you were to add 10,000 units on Martha's Vineyard, you would probably destroy all the roads, the houses, you know, the restaurants, the stores, all of that sort of stuff. And then meanwhile, the water quality, the beach quality, all the things that make it great at a certain population. And if you were to add substantially to that population, it's no longer great. And you see that in like New Canaan. I mean, the state of Connecticut wants New Canaan to essentially double the size of the quantity of its housing stock, which would absolutely 100% destroy New Canaan. We couldn't have the schools, we couldn't have the playing fields, you couldn't shop, you couldn't drive, you couldn't do anything else. And even if you doubled it, I'm not necessarily sure you'd make it competitive. I mean, so you've got to go with a lot more density, but how you do a lot more density without destroying what is good is very, very hard to figure out. When you go down south or you go out west, and there's a lot of places where, you know, you add an outer loop around the city. And all that the outer loop does is encourage a ton more people to go ahead and move into the outer loop. And then you got to add another outer loop. And now you got even more people moving in. So I don't know, as human beings, I'm not sure exactly how you do that and how you get out of it. Tough.
Is that what happened in Scottsdale, Nicole?
Absolutely. No, that's why I'm nodding. Absolutely. And that's the challenge that we talk about on city council all the time. The strategic growth while keeping the character in place and height and density. And we're having those conversations a lot out here as well.
And out there too, especially water. How do you get the right water everywhere? And that's a big one. You don't want to mess that up.
Absolutely.
But the question we asked, Scott, was why isn't your industry building more houses? If you believe, and everybody believes, that we're not keeping up with our housing stock, and Martha's Vineyard aside, we've just seen, I think on Apple News this morning, one of the top stories was the great Southern migration and the migration to states like Arizona and Texas and the Carolinas and Florida, and how people are moving and they're building in these states.
Well, one huge issue comes up on just the cost of construction. And so like every time everyone says we need more energy efficient homes, and you say, okay, that's great, but we need the homes to cost less. And those two things don't go together. And so when you add in all the energy, it's like the energy efficient appliances probably pay for themselves over the long haul. But if you're struggling to get a down payment, you can't afford to put energy efficient appliances in your house, but by law they have to. So now again, we're pricing people out of the market. I walked through a house, a decade ago that we had taken down a 200-year-old house and we were putting up a new house. And the amount of legislated structure that was in this house was insane, absolutely crazy. I mean, we took down a house that had 24-inch on center with like one nail holding the thing together. It had been there for 200 years. And now we've got like 16 on center with 20 nails per joist, and you got tie downs to the foundation. So the brick house won't blow away. I mean, when's a brick house going to blow away, for God's sakes? And all of those are legislated, and it's more dollars here, more dollars here, more dollars here, and it becomes more expensive. And then you throw in the permitting issues where, in some places you can get a permit in a day. In like Greenwich, I mean, 6 months if you're lucky, if that's like you don't even really have any issues. And so it just, the permitting process drives that. And then, you end up with restrictions. Everything keeps getting, the lots keep allowing for less and less build, which ends up increasing the price of the per cost. You can't get the same efficiencies. And so it's a cycle that we've created, far more expensive housing. And in some places, people can figure out how to get around that and do things differently. But in many areas, it's just been legislated to almost like put housing out of the economic reach of much of the population.
I want to get real specific with you, and then I want to hear from Nicole and some of the others on your and Mary in Westchester. So Roberto, let's talk about let's talk about a 2,000 square foot house, because that's something that you guys can deal with in New York. 2,000 square feet sounds legitimate. It's about the average size of a house, I think, in America. Scott, how much would it cost you if I asked you as my builder to go find me a lot in New Canaan, the cheapest lot you could, and build me the cheapest 2,000 square foot house you could build me in New Canaan? What would that cost me roughly?
But
Simplest.
first, John, how much does the land cost? You got to get the land. How much
Right.
does it cost?
Right. So I think that the land is going to start at $900,000 for the least expensive lot in town.
And how big is that? A quarter of an acre, half an acre?
It could be 4 acres, but if it's 4 acres, it's because it's on the edge of town, and maybe it's very rocky, and maybe it's full of wetlands, and it has challenges. So you can have a challenging quarter acre, or you can have a challenging 2 acre. So
Okay.
more likely it'll be a quarter acre.
$900,000 lot. I was literally gonna go just down the same path. So Scott, go ahead.
Well, let me start out with saying, like in my affordable housing world, to produce let's call it 1,000 square foot apartment, which includes common space and the other sort of areas and stuff, you're probably talking about $650 a unit, including land cost. So that's $650 for 1,000 square foot type unit. For housing, it's tough as you get to smaller, and by Fairfield County, 2,000 is smaller. It's hard. You can get some efficiencies with a simple design under like a nice cape or whatever, but you also have economies of scale that you're still building a kitchen, you're still building a master bath, you still got to have somebody there to manage it, you still got a driveway, all that stuff. I mean, you probably, I don't know if you can do for under like 350, and you're probably closer to 450 a square foot. So I mean, call it 700 to $1 million in order to build a 2,000 square foot house.
Now, Roberto, the market is very efficient, and we've all done that calculation that he just described in our head. So here's one of my listings in New Canaan, and it's on 2 acres, and it's got a lot of wetlands. So the only building envelope at 94 Indian Rock Road is where the existing 1950s ranch is sitting. And that's a roughly 2,000 square foot house, right? 2,115 square feet, 2 bedroom, 2 bath, according to the tax card. And he wants $1,450,000. I asked a builder, what would it cost to renovate this ground up? Meaning I need new windows, new appliances, new walls, new paint, just about new everything. And I got a price of about $800,000. So if you could buy this lot for $1 million, which we suppose, let's say it's a little bit better than the cheapest lot in town at 900. If you could buy this for $1 million and you could renovate this house for $800,000, you'd be in for $1.8 million.
Yeah.
That's
How
the
long would it take?
calculus
Is that a
people are
year
doing.
process?
What's that?
Is that a year process?
Scott?
Probably a little bit less. To renovate a house of that size is probably an 8 to 10 month process, whereas building it new, I mean, you can certainly build it, but there's a lot more planning that has to go into it, and more approval process, likely with wetlands and an existing lot.
So Scott, as a speculative builder, would you take a bet? Would you buy that for $1 million, knock it down, and put $1 million house on it?
Well, I don't know whether or not, but can you sell a 2,000 square foot house in New Canaan for $1 million? And that $1.8 million, you don't make any money. So can you sell a 2,000 square foot house in New Canaan for 2.2?
The question is, are you selling? The question is, are you selling that 1.45 to him for $1 million?
I'm saying if my client says, fine, I'll take $1 million. I mean, if he's willing to take $1 million and Scott's willing to build it over a year and put $1 million onto the lot, Scott's saying you're still stuck with a 2,000 square foot house for $2 million. You've got $1,000 a foot into your house. And the average has gone in New Canaan in the last couple of years from, say, $500 to $600 per square foot. It's a mostly meaningless number, dollars per foot, but it's instructive to know that in this exercise, we're creating $1,000 a foot house. I know that Arnold Karp's new condos cost roughly $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 per foot. The other fancy condos we've talked about on this show in Westport, Greenwich, Southport, any of those luxury condos are over $1,000 a foot. So the market is moving there to the $1,000 a foot. But in New Canaan, you can still buy houses at the $500,000-$600,000 level that are, perfectly nice. But you can't get new construction, Scott and I are telling you, for less than $1,000 a foot.
How do the taxes compare on equivalent condo to a freestanding house?
Theoretically, they are supposed to be the same. We're supposed to be charging 70% of the market rate. And we're supposed to take that number, the assessment, and multiply it by roughly 18. So $18 per thousand of real estate. That means for $1.2 million condo, right? The assessment, or $1.3 million condo, the assessment will be $1 million and the taxes will be 18. So 18 on $1.3 million of condo or house in Westport or New Canaan.
So if I'm comes down to, if I'm a New Yorker and I'm trying to move to Connecticut and I can't find anything, and I say, John, find me some land, I'll build a new house, that's far more expensive.
So I would say, what's your budget? And if you came to me and said, I have only $1.5 million, I would say, then we should probably go find a $500,000 piece of real estate. And we can go in the surrounding towns. We can go to Wilton. We can go to Stamford. We can go to Norwalk. And we can find a $500,000 piece of land. And you can put $1 million renovation, or you can build, as Scott just described, a modest house for maybe $1 million. That's how you get to $1.5 million.
Are those numbers the same in the Hamptons, Scott?
The construction costs are about the same in the Hamptons. I mean, it can be depending on exactly what you're doing and where, it can be a little bit less or a little bit more. I mean, it's like if you're out in Montauk, you've got to pay a premium because it's just, the commute is awful for the guys. And again, it just depends on the level of the construction of what's being done.
But if you're in South, like for example, Southampton Village, you raise a house and you would put a 3,000 square foot house on it. Your price per square foot, 600.
I mean, and this is where I'm still having a hard time even wrapping my head around the construction cost increase in the last couple of years. What used to be 550 to 650. I mean, you're kind of 7 to 9. I mean, so it's stuff's just, it's gone up. And again, and part of that is also people's taste has gone up. So it's not just the fact that, again, the labor is in high demand. A lot of the supplies are in high demand, but people actually want nicer stuff too. So and you get a whole bunch of those inefficiencies.
You have a division that does like, just like re-renovates properties and does smaller projects, right? On houses, do you not?
Yes. So I mean, we had. Go ahead. Yep.
Has your volume of business on that increased?
Yes. So we found that it's for like our care division and our renovation addition group. They're pretty well full and have huge, nice, very, very nice backlog. And that should continue because, people need help. And especially in, since COVID, all the vendors are busy. And so it was hard to get a plumber to call you back before. Good luck today. And if you don't have some muscle in the marketplace, and again, it's one thing to ask for the plumber, but if you got to get a plumber, a carpenter, an electrician, and a tile guy, and you got to coordinate that yourself, good luck. I mean, it's just it's herding cats in the best of cases, and people complain and say, I called 6 times. I'm like, well, that's not too bad. It takes me 5. I mean, and that's when we're their biggest customer. So it's not surprising that the individual, it's very tough.
Wow.
So Nicole, if I take my $1.5 million and I head out to Scottsdale, can I get more for my money? I mean, we've been reading for years about how all these retirees are selling their New Canaan and their Martha's Vineyard places, and they're heading out to Scottsdale. What are the building costs in Scottsdale? Wait, you're muted. Say it again.
I just pulled just as an example, a project that was just recently done, 2,071 square feet in a desirable area of Scottsdale, very popular for no HOAs, so vacation rentals. They do a lot of Airbnbs because they're not regulated. So it's very common to acquire properties. For example, this one was acquired at it was 380 a square foot. So that puts it at 2,071 square feet. That's 805,000 acquisition cost. You do a very light remodel to it. So I'm gonna guess, let's see, on average, you're looking at 50 to 75,000 into it. Listed at 506 a square foot now, 9 months later, at $1.1 million. So that's a pretty fair example of what you see often, and you could probably maximize that, do a little bit better, pick a different location, but that's a fair example of what a large population of investors are doing. Not necessarily a big tear down, but those light remodels, mostly because with this low inventory, investors can then turn them into Airbnbs, and so their pocketbooks, you can usually upcharge and create that demand because it is turnkey and ready for vacation rentals.
Is there a big market for that? I mean, is that you seeing a lot of those transactions?
I would say in the last 2 years, it's gone down. So the opportunity is, I'm seeing more buy and hold long-term or fix and flip, quicker fix and flips. Our vacation rental market probably will slow down from the trends that we're seeing. I think Austin and Scottsdale were those that are declining. We went up the fastest in terms of short-term rental activity. We're also going down the quickest as well. So I don't see as much of it as in the last 2 years, but just from an opportunity standpoint, there's still a large amount of our infill, since, development, something that we talk about often, a large amount of our infill projects could easily use, 50 to 150,000 of renovations. And there's still large opportunity. People want turnkey. Most clients that are coming in here, they don't want to move in and then renovate their vacation home. So there's still a large amount of opportunity for that.
So I see there's a comment in the that came in that said, John, you gave examples of would-be sellers balking at higher rates. Is that the real reason that they're not selling? Well, I think the real reason they're not selling their big house in Martha's Vineyard or New Canaan and downsizing is that we have so few options here, so little inventory. And when they looked at Scottsdale and they're realizing that they're going to spend $600 a foot in Scottsdale, up from $380, that there's no longer a deal either downsizing in their own town or moving to the Sun Belt. The deals aren't there. And what we're hearing from Nicole is partly it's because investors are buying up these houses. But investors are buying up these houses because of what Scott said earlier. Millennials, there are 80 million millennials coming into the market, replacing something like 40 million Gen Xers. So there's a whole lot more millennials coming into the homeownership market. And then the second factor, which is the Airbnb factor. Now, Roberto's market has taken care of that by making Airbnb illegal in Manhattan. Is that working?
Pretty much. I mean, and you get fined, big fines. So people don't do it.
And New Canaan has,
minimum,
and we don't have it in New Canaan.
Is it a 30-day minimum?
I don't think you can do it at all.
You can't do it at all.
I mean,
okay.
I don't think so. I mean, people do it, and I don't know why, because apparently the fines are substantial. Painfully substantial. But I still hear about people do, I'm in this Airbnb. I was like, how? I don't get involved with it because I just don't want to be touched by it. So I don't really pay attention to the exact rules, but it's pretty sticky. So John,
Actually,
can we talk?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, I mean that was just another one of the issues that so much housing stock has come off the market because of Airbnb stuff. That's another part of the shortage in desirable areas. And now again, in some places they're fighting back and saying, no, that's not happening anymore.
So, John, in your report, you talked about the price per square foot has basically leveled. The Greenwich price per square foot has gone down. Is there no demand in Greenwich? All the people left and went to Palm Beach, and no one's buying in Greenwich anymore?
No, I just thought it was interesting that Greenwich hasn't exactly crashed on a per foot basis. So let's not misunderstand. Greenwich is doing just fine. But you have to understand that in Greenwich, where the average price is what, Scott, over $3 million, something like 3.2, has just momentarily come down, a little bit into the twos, while meanwhile, New Canaan and Westport have had a couple of great months strung together, and now we're into the mid twos. And so suddenly I was commenting on the fact that Greenwich and New Canaan and Westport have converged. However, on a price per square foot basis, the house on the lot in Greenwich is a relatively small part of the value. On a $3 million property in Greenwich, 2 million or more can be, 2.5 million of that value can be in the land. So when we start talking about the 2,000 square foot ranch, like the one I just showed you, the 2,000 square foot ranch in Greenwich, and instead of it being asking $1,450,000, maybe they're asking $2,450,000 for that 2,000 foot ranch, but they're only ascribing 100,000 or 200,000 of the value on the 1950s ranch, and another 2.2 million for the lot in Greenwich.
And there's a couple, and Greenwich can get really skewed by a couple of the high-end properties. For example, we're associated with the property that is going to close likely in August, and it's around a $40 million number. And you toss in a couple of those, and New Canaan doesn't have any of those, not by a long shot. And so those numbers all of a sudden, boom, way up. And pretty much the waterfront communities and the big backcountry estates in a Greenwich or waterfront in Westport or Rye or Darien or places like that helps to really skew some numbers much higher.
So the prediction is the Greenwich price per foot will probably go back up, that this is probably a momentary lapse for Greenwich.
Is there an inventory shortage there, though, relatively?
There is. You're starting to see that Greenwich, Darien, New Canaan, Westport, Southport, all of those communities are at 1/3 of normal inventory levels. And some of the other communities, maybe around those most expensive 4 or most expensive 5, the next 5 are probably right behind them at 50% of normal inventory.
Actually, you got to start using the word historical, not normal. Historical norms.
That's fair too, because historically we had a 1-hour commute to Westport and we had a 1-hour commute to New Canaan. And with COVID, we started to see work from home start to affect how people felt about commutability and the value of a short commute. And so the historical norms got all out of whack. People were suddenly saying, well, if I can work from home, or I only have to commute into my law office 2 days a week instead of 5, then I'm willing to accept a 90-minute commute.
Hey, as we start closing in toward the end of the show, just 2 other sort of mid-year takeaways for me. One is I enjoy learning about all these new areas. And sure enough, when the opportunity came to come up to Martha's Vineyard, it's like, hey, wait a minute, we did this on the show. I know some of these names. I get how some of this stuff ties together. And it definitely makes it more fun to actually, go someplace when you've heard some of these things. And it certainly has piqued my interest to other areas around the country and quite frankly, around the world. And then there's the second takeaway from this is we have a small office out in the Hamptons. And sure enough, the insurance bill came around for the property and we couldn't get insured this year. And so this was literally like 2 weeks after the show. And it's like, But having gone through the show, just, I was ready for that, understood it, knew it was normal, knew that that's what's happening. And again, we're well over a mile away. Well, I think we're probably a mile as the crow flies away from the ocean, and still it's uninsurable inside of an ocean type community. So it's just, again, interesting that you learn some stuff here before it really happens to you, which is always a plus.
What decision are
Unbelievable.
you going to make on insurance? Are you going to
There-
not insure?
You go to I forget what the terminology is, but there's qualified insurers and there's non-qualified. And so you go to non-qualified and you put together a package that's non-traditional. And so there's gaps inside of it. It's not as full as what you would like it to be. And if something were to actually happen, there's not as much recourse against the insurance company should something happen. And there's an argument as to, who pays how much and how.
All right, before we get to more conclusions, Mary, are you seeing the same thing in Rye? We had a episode 2 weeks ago about uninsurable Florida and the insurance crisis, the property insurance crisis in Florida, not only rising rates, but a lot of people found that their insurance company had either gone bankrupt or left the state or were just simply not writing new policies. So are you seeing that on the waterfront in Westchester?
No, with the particular, after we had a Hurricane Ida up here September, almost 2 years ago, and there's a particular area that hit very hard, already was hit by hurricanes in the past. Those homes, I understand, are having some trouble, but not like that was not a coastal storm, so it didn't affect the waterfront property. So it's more this particular area in Rye that's inland.
How about Amy, Pam? Are we seeing any of that in Westport or Southport or the Fairfield Beach? Difficulty or expensive insurance?
Not that I'm aware of. It hasn't been a huge topic.
So it's just Martha's Vineyard, Scott Hobbs and Hamptons and Martha's Vineyard in Florida, but it's coming.
Scott, your office looks great though. I pointed it out to my wife just 2 days ago. It's like, oh, there's Scott's office. She was like, Scott? I was just like, nice place, right? Oh.
So what are the predictions, Roberto? You did write a rather eloquent market report, and you said that you have customers who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for next spring's market. Why?
They're paralyzed. They cannot wrap their heads around the monthly payments and making that move. And then, I think that the people and a lot of the buyers that I have are buyers who were in the marketplace prior to the interest rate spiking, right? So things that they were looking at, in some ways with the same budget, they can't afford anymore. The new buyers are tremendously more aggressive. They have no idea what a 3% mortgage rate looks like. They know what the numbers are now. They've entered the marketplace. That's their perspective. So the newer buyers are far more easy to shepherd along in the process because they're aggressively moving through it. The others are overwhelmingly hesitant and they want to wait, but they don't realize that everybody's waiting. Everybody's waiting. And the moment it starts to unleash, it just, and Manhattan is notorious for it's slow. What happened? It's busy. I mean, in a second, it just turns the corner and everybody's in. And I've been waiting for that to happen. I actually expected it to happen this past spring, but the mortgage rates continue to stay high because of inflation. But inflation is curving off. Inflation is really curving off. So I think the interest rates will stay at where they are for a bit. But as we hit into next year, it's going to start to alleviate. And that's going to be the time when everybody's got their bonus. It's going to be the first kind of post-COVID, post-2021 craziness spring, like normal spring that we will have had, I think. But then that means busy.
Are any of those buyers transferable? Will any of them say, I waited, I still can't get what I want, I'm going to Rye, I'm going to Connecticut, I can't get what I want for what I can afford in New York?
They might. My buyers are pretty diehard. They want to buy, they're focused to buy, but they might.
Are they more interested in being in New York as a renter or being a homeowner now that they're starting a family, or the kids are out of the house and they're looking for a pied-a-terre or apartment in the city? I mean, are they focused on their lifestyle or are they focused on being a homeowner?
I think it's more about lifestyle right now, to be honest. And because people are paying out, they can't buy, they're paying outrageous amount of money for rent. There was a property that I was showing to a client, and it was a 1-bedroom. She wanted to buy it for an NYU student who was going to be a junior, and it was asking 1.4, maybe something like that. And the buyer decided not to. They decided to rent it. They rented. They asked $5,500 in rent. They got $6,000 like that in one day. 1-bedroom apartment.
All right. In the final few seconds, I got to say, this has been a great wrap up. I'm very excited to be doing shows on Westchester and Westport in the next 2 weeks. I want to ask that question again, whether people are willing, if they can't get what they want in these premier communities, are they willing to take the next community over? That's going to be one of the questions. How transferable is this demand? That's the key question for the next couple of weeks. Thank you all, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to our sponsor.